Guardians of the Galaxy. What a fun team of total weirdos. I love Guardians of the Galaxy. Hey, look at what I'm wearing. Yeah, this is the shirt that Star-Lord will be wearing in the movie sequel. I think that everybody pretty much knows Guardians of the Galaxy from the movies. And I know what you're thinking. Did I somehow use special effects to put Chris Pratt's body over mine? No, this is my actual physique. So now that your mind is totally blown, let me try to put on a show and entertain you. There have been 3 eras, we'll call them, of Guardians of the Galaxy. And that was a team that would show up as guest stars throughout the 70s in various Marvel comic books, went dormant for at least a decade, came back in the 90s as their own title set in the future. That was done by a guy named Jim Valentino, who went on to co-found Image Comics. And then again, it sort of went totally dormant for about a decade, came back around 2008, set in the current era of Marvel Comics, and that's basically the version of the team that we know in the movies. But they're all fun eras. I don't know how to decide which one I want to review. I want to review one of them, but I don't know which one. So I was thinking, okay, it's basically about time for Cinco de Mayo. I asked my girlfriend to fill a piñata full of weird, fun stuff, including a Guardians of the Galaxy comic book. Surprise me. So, it's been set up. Let's go break it open and see what we have to review. Here I go. Something fell off. Am I all close?
Yes, you're right next to it.
Oh no! There was a glass thing in there. It was, it was Crystal Skull vodka.
Oh man.
No Crystal Skull vodka for me. It looks like there's candy. There's some here's some unbroken alcohol.
All right, score.
And party poppers.
Nice.
I'm gonna have some candy and alcohol.
More alcohol.
And let's see what this comic is. All right. So this is just the back of it. I'm gonna pull it out here. Oh, awesome. Okay, this is from the 90s era. This is Jim Valentino. All right, this is gonna be fun to review. So here's what remains of the piñata. Broke that up pretty good. There's some fun stuff inside, as you saw, that we'll take advantage of while I do this review. And here's the comic book that was attached to it. It was basically just taped on because it wouldn't quite fit inside. But I didn't know what it was, so that's a good surprise. I was a big fan of this comic from like 1990 to about like 1992 when Jim Valentino was doing it. I would say that his art style is mostly just functional. I wouldn't call it like flashy or the best, but I also think it's pretty easy to read. And he also wrote this book, so it's pretty much the singular vision of one creator. It was set in the future. It was set like around the year 3000, which gave Jim Valentino tremendous leeway to do whatever he wanted. But I would say that this book featured 2 recurring types of tropes. One was an exploration of all sorts of cool sci-fi ideas, kind of like you'd see on Star Trek, honestly. Very similar sci-fi exploration of cool ideas. And then also a lot of callbacks to Marvel comic book history, even though we're 1,000 years forward. So characters like Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four are long dead. There were all sorts of cool ways it called back to the Marvel comic book history that we, the readers, knew and loved. Without further ado, let's get right into it, see which of those tropes we see, and I'll also keep my eye out for elements that maybe have been used in the movies. This is issue 2 of the 1990 comic book, and we're starting right off with the entire Guardians of the Galaxy team facing an enemy that they met at the end of the first issue. We've got some interesting tropes right off the bat looking at this first page. First, there's the history of the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves. The Guardians of the Galaxy first appeared in Marvel Superheroes issue number 18 back in 1969, and they were created by writer Arnold Drake and artist Gene Colan. The overall premise is that a four-man team is fighting back against the aliens, the Badoon, who have conquered the Milky Way galaxy. Our four main characters at that time included Charlie 27 from Jupiter, Martin X from Pluto, Yondu from Alpha Centauri 4, and Major Vance Astrovic from Earth. These characters went on various time-traveling adventures where they met several of the Marvel superheroes of the modern era throughout the 1970s, but then they faded into relative obscurity until they were revived in this title by Jim Valentino, and it was set in their modern era, which was the year 3000. We also see Yondu there, and while he might be somewhat recognizable as the character that Michael Rooker plays in the movies, he's got blue skin and he's got the red fin on his head. Obviously, he's not exactly like the version we've seen in the movies. These days, the comics have said that this version of Yondu is like a great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson of the version that we've seen in the movies. This version in the comics has been called a noble savage, which basically means he's a little bit of a stereotype of how Native Americans were portrayed at this point in time. He is an alien that's native to Alpha Centauri 4. He's very much in tune with nature. He doesn't use a lot of technology. He's just basically a hunter. He carries around a bow and arrow. He's a very simple man, but he's the instinct of the team. Whereas Martin X is the brains of the operation, Charlie 27 is the muscle, and Vance Astro is definitely the heart of the team. He cares the most. He has the most passion and the most drive to be a hero. So what's the team worried about? Well, the conflict, as we see in the next two-page spread, is they're up against an evil alien race. The Guardians, at this point in time, have decided to go on a quest for Captain America's shield. It's taken them to a remote planet called Korg, which is in the process of being conquered by these alien cyborgs that they've come up against. Captain America's shield, that's a nice throwback to the past. While Captain America himself isn't around anymore, his shield was made out of vibranium and adamantium, two metals that made it basically indestructible, and that would survive 1,000 years. So that's sort of a relic to a time when there were heroes, and the Guardians want to find this. It's a quasi-religious artifact. And those aliens are called the Stark. Now, don't get too far ahead of us, but that's obviously a reference to Iron Man, and we'll delve more deeply into what that relationship is in a few pages. Just a couple pages in, and we're already getting a bunch of tropes. We're having fun. Since this is an early issue, the first several panels all are heavy on descriptive text, which describes who the superheroes are and what their powers are. And I think that this was one of the cool sci-fi ideas about Guardians of the Galaxy. These guys weren't just aliens. They were modified humans, genetically modified. Basically, what it's all about is humans have colonized the planets in our own solar system. For instance, Charlie 27, he's from Jupiter, which has a much denser gravity, so he needed to be genetically modified to have enhanced muscle tissue. So he's super strong. That's his power. Starhawk lived on the planet Arcturus, and he had light powers, which were actually given to him by a hawk god. That has nothing to do with genetic modification, I just realized. He's just a weirdo. Martin X is from Pluto, where it's really cold. So his appearance is all crystalline facets. And one hand of his can produce cold blasts, and the other can produce heat blasts. Martin X was originally a scientist, but as the last survivor of his race, he and his big brain are now the leader of Guardians of the Galaxy. Another genetically modified person is Nikki. she was from Mercury. So she actually has a fire head because she's on a flaming hot planet. At the end of the last issue, the Guardians of the Galaxy knocked out a powerful member of the Stark, and one of their field lieutenants is now saying, get him back. Meanwhile, Vance Astro is trying to protect their prisoner and saying, pal, you ain't getting him, but the Stark overwhelmed them and take this guy back. And the name of this guy is pretty cool, Taserface. Taserface is going to be one of Yondu's Ravagers in the upcoming movie sequel. I'm not sure how big a role that is. It's obviously a very different role than this, where he's an alien that uses cyborg armor like the rest of his race. But Jim Valentino has said that basically he was trying to come up with a new name for this bad guy, and his young son was like, Taserface. Sort of thinking of basically Batman villains like Two-Face and tasers, which were kind of new around 1990. And it sounds ridiculous, but also kind of awesome. That's badass. Also badass is this bacon-flavored vodka. I'm going to try some of this. Ooh, that's actually quite bacony. Way more bacony than I would have expected. Not bad. Strong, too. While one of the Stark grabs Taserface, another Stark member slices open Vance Astro's containment suit. And on the next panel it reads to us, its only protection gone, his skin begins to fester, bursting into a smoldering ooze as it rapidly oxidizes due to his true age. And Vance Astro just collapses. The containment suit. This is such a cool idea. Vance Astro was an astronaut in modern day Marvel times who was going to go on a 1,000-year trip to Alpha Centauri 4. It would take 1,000 years for the ship to reach there. And in order to survive all that time, they built this containment suit that prevented him from aging. But he couldn't take it off. He couldn't remove it. So this was a big deal. He knew that he would be leaving behind his family and friends in the name of exploration. When he arrived on Alpha Centauri 4, he found out that in between those 1,000 years, humanity had actually created faster than light travel, and they'd already colonized all these other worlds. So his trip was sort of meaningless. He was greeted as a hero because he was an explorer who had done this really brave thing. But his whole point, his reason for being, for collecting data and information and sending it back to Earth was gone all of a sudden. It was gone. But he, along the way, developed mutant powers. He developed psychokinesis. He could move things with his mind. Charlie calls for Martin X's help, but even though Martin X is very smart and has powers, he's really not much of a fighter. Fortunately, Nikki comes in to help out with the Stark that are attacking him. Martin X rushes over and freezes Vance Astro's chest to prevent him from dying. While all of this is happening, the Guardians keep battling the very powerful Stark, and we see that Yondu is doing something interesting. Yondu is a mystic weapons master from Earth's only extrastellar colony, Centauri 4. He controls the Yaka arrow, a shaft which turns in mid-flight in response to his high-pitched whistle. He does not notice the Stark warrior coming up behind him until it is too late. And he gets punched and knocked out in a pretty embarrassing pose. The Yaka arrow obviously made its way into the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. That's where Yondu can whistle and control the flight path of the arrow. In the comics, the way they explain it is that Yaka is a metal indigenous to Alpha Centauri 4, and it reacts to various octaves of sound. It can change its trajectory, but not its speed. So Yondu still has to fire the arrow, but then he can actually have it go this way and that, and even come right back to his hand. A little bit like how Captain America could throw his shield and angle it so that it could knock someone out in return. So, yeah, the Yaka arrow. Yaka arrow? You gotta be kidding me with all this candy that was in there. But I think what I'm actually gonna have is, I've never seen this before, a pocket shot. It's just a pouch of tequila. Perfect for Cinco de Mayo. How are you supposed to drink out of this, though? Am I supposed to pour this in something? Oh, that's so strong. 80 proof. Stronger than the vodka. Not only are the Guardians of the Galaxy getting their asses kicked by the Stark, but Yondu, now knocked out, is approached by one of the natives of the planet Korg, who blames them, the Guardians, for what's going on, and he pulls out a knife to slit Yondu's throat while he's unconscious. So it's the perfect time to cut to elsewhere in space. He is called Fire Lord, last survivor of the planet Xandar, former Herald of Galactus. Fire Lord is a part of Marvel history. He was the replacement of the Silver Surfer as Herald of Galactus. There have been several people that have been Heralds of Galactus. So he's a Fantastic Four supporting character. He's also appeared in the Silver Surfer books. And he was always a literal hothead back in the day. He was impulsive. He wasn't necessarily a villain, but he also originally wasn't much of a hero. He was sort of an anti-hero. He had a code, but he also served Galactus, whose whole point was to eat planets. Anyway, we're told that now he has matured. It's been 1,000 years. He no longer serves Galactus, and he's taken on the mantle of protector of the universe. The narration continues, telling us that Fire Lord is now a scourge of evil throughout the known universe. He seeks now to confine a new form of evil, now aborning, an evil called the Stark. So his mission is to find the Stark and prevent them from conquering other planets. Who's telling us this? Another part of Marvel history. It's the Watcher, as we see in the next few panels, giving us the history of who the Stark is. Now, the Watcher was originally a supporting character in the Fantastic Four, and he showed up through various other Marvel titles throughout the years, but he was co-created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. He's part of a race, really, that calls themselves the Watchers. This specific guy is called Uatu. Their whole thing is that they've been around since the dawn of time, and they're very, very powerful, but they've pledged not to interfere, only observe what's going on in the universe. That said, this version of the Watcher has felt the need to interfere from time to time when there's matters of cosmic danger, because he basically really likes the human race. So he's broken his vow a couple times. The Watcher says, "In order to understand just who the Stark are, we must first understand whence they came. And to do that, we must peel back the veil of time to the dawning years of your 21st century, where in this future timeline, your world was unexpectedly and savagely attacked by your nearest planetary neighbor, Mars." And if you look specifically at the Martian invaders, they're very clearly the alien invaders from H.G. Wells' famous War of the Worlds. We've got this sci-fi idea of a post-apocalyptic invasion that devastated Earth. But even more than that, it's specifically tied into Marvel history in a really unique way. The Martians from War of the Worlds, it's in the public domain. So plenty of comic book publishers have used H.G. Wells' story, The War of the Worlds, including Marvel Comics. And in 1973, they created a title with a superhero called Killraven. It was set in the near future, something like 1990, I don't know what, maybe as early as 2000, 1997, something weird like that, which at the time of the publication of the comics was, 20 years in the future, but we've since then surpassed that. It still sort of exists in Marvel continuity as a parallel timeline at this point. The Martians conquered Earth completely, and Killraven was this guy who fought back against them. He was just a hero in a post-apocalyptic world, kind of a superhero Mad Max, if you will. We're told that the superheroes literally lost this battle, including Iron Man. Without the ability to safeguard on Earth his most precious inventions, his suits of armor and the circuitry they contained, and not wishing them to fall into the hands of the Martians should he fall, as he eventually did, he used the technological resources at his disposal to launch them into space. Iron Man intended for his suits of armor to simply be lost in space, but an accident caused this spaceship to be knocked off course. Maybe he should have just had them blown up, but whatever. This ship landed on a primitive alien world. Over the years, these aliens slowly learned what the armor and the spaceship could do, and it advanced their society way faster than it ever should have been. And they came to revere the creator of the suits of armor. They took their name after the creator of the suits of armor. That's why they're called the Stark. So that's a pretty cool idea, influencing alien civilizations. We're always told in Star Trek that the prime directive is to not make contact with species of aliens that haven't invented warp-level space travel. And I don't feel like we're ever really shown the harm that could do. It's always just sort of this like no-no that they shouldn't do, and yet they constantly sort of break that rule because the aliens need help or somebody else is interfering with them. But this is an interesting idea showing what could happen. This technology advanced them faster than they were supposed to evolve, So they never really learned the wisdom or the humility that might come with these discoveries. And in fact, over the next several pages, we learned that they became so technologically advanced so fast that they started polluting their world and using up their resources way too fast. And then they used the armor to create cyborg sentries, and they went off into space to conquer other worlds and gather more resources. That apocalyptic level of pollution must have seemed a little more sci-fi in 1990 than unfortunately it does here in 2017. 27 years later, it's a little scary how much damage we're doing to the planet. And now that I've lectured you, I'm going to bring it back down to Earth with a shot of this stuff called Kinky Blue. I don't know what it is, but I'm excited to try it. Oh, that's good. That's a pre-mixed drink. Pre-mixed vodka and all sorts of tropical berry flavors. This is good. Now that we know who the Stark are, we go back to the action. We're focusing on Charlie 27's thoughts. He's trying to wonder how many of these guys there are, what their mission is. And he starts to notice something. He notices that they're not really attacking Nikki as intensely as they're attacking him or Starhawk or others. So he says, I have noticed, both in the air and on the ground, the female Starks seem to be giving the orders. I'm going to play a hunch, and Harkov, help us if I'm wrong. Starhawk, change to Alita, now! And with that, we see Starhawk think, at last, Charlie has found the solution again. Starhawk is constantly reborn, and he's called the One Who Knows. So that's why he's saying, at last, Charlie has figured out the solution. This is such a cool, weird sci-fi idea. First of all, he's being told to change into Alita, and we'll get into that. Like, Starhawk is basically two people. But the most interesting thing to me is how he basically at the end of his life, all of his knowledge and memory is sent back in time into his infant body. So he doesn't physically time travel, but all of his knowledge is constantly sent back, and he can act on that knowledge. But it's not like anybody has a photographic memory, so it's more like he understands the broad strokes of where things are going, or he'll remember maybe very specific details that have happened to him. But it's also dangerous knowing this, and the current Guardians of the Galaxy series has said that this version in the future has been wiped out because Starhawk at some point did something to change the future, and he can't fix it. He's just done this cycle so many times. He's gotten it to a point where it's broken. Pretty weird idea. I mean, maybe someday they do solve it, but as of right now, Starhawk has sort of broken things. Starhawk changes into Alita. Two beings, they both have different light-based powers, and they consider themselves married as husband and wife, but they can only occupy the same physical space one at a time. The other is always in some sort of limbo. So Alita shows up, she starts fighting, and sure enough, the Stark won't attack her as strongly. So we hit two tropes. We've got a merged being occupying the same body. That's pretty cool. Although we have seen it before with like the DC superhero Captain Marvel, for instance. And then we've got a matriarchal society. That's what the Stark is. They take their orders from women, so they're reluctant to attack the female Guardians of the Galaxy. Alita's light powers enable her to create hard light. So she doesn't really fly so much as she moves herself around on stepping discs. She captures some of the Stark in bubbles, and she creates a hard energy blast against the female field leader of the Stark, which causes her to crash to the ground, and her team shouts, "She's dead." Alita is horrified by this. She goes, "No, I didn't intend to kill her." And it gets the Stark even more angry. Alita doesn't even have the excuse of drinking like me. Back at the Stark's field command post, there's a female general, and she's berating Taserface, telling him, "You dishonor your whole gender." And a messenger comes into the tent to explain that the lieutenant has just been killed. The general slaps him away and says, "How dare you come to me with news of her disgrace?" In the Stark's eyes, this female being killed by a man is the ultimate disgrace. But then the general is told that she was actually killed by another woman, and she gets even angrier. Things are going downhill for the Guardians, and Taserface re-enters the battle fray and captures Nikki from behind, holding her hostage, and tells the whole team, "Surrender immediately, aliens, or your leader's life is forfeit." Meanwhile, Alita is surrounded by a bunch of the Stark, and they're ordered to fire on her at the same exact time that she is trying to change back to Starhawk, who is a little more powerful than her. And they're blasted with the alien rays as they try to separate. And it looks like they actually are being separated. This was 27 years ago, so I really don't remember what happens in the next issue, but I can tell you that it was a lot of fun to read this title. It went about 60-some issues, but Jim Valentino only did about half of those before he left Marvel, along with big names like Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and they started Image. So, this was his last thing that he worked on when he was at Marvel at the time. It was a lot of fun because he just had so much freedom to just do whatever he wanted as both the writer and the artist. I thought this comic was a blast. Now, I like the current version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but this was the original team. It does bring one more idea to mind, though. Future members? Obviously, they've adapted Yondu into a version of the current Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think that was, thanks to the movie. I think that it's definitely possible that the movie could look at these characters like Martin X, Alita, Starhawk, who else? Charlie, maybe Vance, and say, these could be other Guardians of the Galaxy members. These could, they don't have to necessarily be humans that were genetically modified, since that sort of took place in the future. They could maybe just be aliens. Simplify it. Yondu is just an alien, isn't he? He's not necessarily, a colonist or anything in the movies. So I think that that's a possibility. We'll see down the road if they ever decide to do that. But my point is that Guardians of the Galaxy has a lot more characters. In fact, I remember Jim Valentino introduced like a future version of the Vision that was still alive. He joined the team. There was a new master of the mystic arts. Doctor Strange had passed away, but now there was an alien who became the master of the mystic arts. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that Doctor Strange basically was the Ancient One and was his mentor. But I'm not 100% clear on if I'm remembering that right. I'm thinking about this some more, and Vance Astro might be one character that they can't use because he was a mutant. So even though he was created in Guardians of the Galaxy, featured in a lot of Avengers issues, stuff like that, because he's a mutant, Fox Studios may have the rights to that along with all the X-Men characters. Maybe it's a situation like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch where Marvel Studios and Fox both have the rights to it, but maybe he's not important enough for Marvel to care. I don't know. Basically, there was a version of Vance Astro that we see in the future is a Guardians of the Galaxy, and because he came back in time in some of his first stories, he changed the path of the modern day teenage Vance Astro. He decided not to become an astronaut, and he got his telekinetic powers earlier, so he ended up joining the New Warriors and then the Avengers. He became the superhero known as Justice. So there were sort of two versions of him existing in comic books at the same time, although in different time periods. They were sort of alternate versions of the same character. That's the fun, cool stuff about Guardians of the Galaxy. It gets so weird, and I could go even further down the rabbit hole explaining this stuff, but then it just sounds convoluted. It's more fun to discover for yourself, issue by issue, as it just creates its own mythology. I strongly recommend the 90s Guardians of the Galaxy series. It's a really fun read. I hope you enjoyed this. Until next week, keep reading comics. Thanks for watching, guys. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I wanted to remind you that we've got a Facebook page where you can talk with other fans or ask me questions, and we also have a Patreon page if you want to support the show in any way. I wanted to thank my girlfriend for helping me put this episode together. She did a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff for me. Also wanted to say a thank you to Hooded Cobra Commander 788. He's been a sounding board for me lately. Discovered him when he won a prize on my channel, and we've been talking. He runs a great YouTube site where he reviews vintage 1980s G.I. Joe figures and vehicles. Very fun and funny channel. I've got some really cool stuff coming up. We're talking Spider-Man fighting marijuana. Kool-Aid Man taking little kids into his secret toy vault. Batman riding a burning bear off of a cliff. I've got so many crazy comic books on my agenda to get to. I can't wait to share it all with you. Until then, thank you so much for watching.